want to talk about these two quotes. I want to talk about this picture and this graph. And I want to do it under the label of something called the long game. So I believe in something called the long game. It's something I espouse to anyone that wants to listen. I've written about it in my book. And essentially what the long game is invest in someone's future rather than just isolating yourself to what they're doing right now. And one of the things that I read that really resonated with me a while back, I read a book called Flow, and it had this chart written. And in that chart, on the x-axis, it had skills. On the y-axis, it had challenges. And it claimed that the optimal state to be in was when your skills and your challenges, were the same, and then you would be in a state of flow. And incredible research, incredible book, and he expressed his view articulately. But what he said happens is those two things often don't align, and then we're often left in a state of boredom or a state of anxiety. So that chart really resonated with me. And so I teach at the high school. I teach mostly sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And what I saw a lot of anxiety and I saw a lot of boredom. And it's really hard being a teacher because you have all these different people in your classroom and you're trying to teach to a collective rather than just locking in on one individual and doing what's best for that individual. So your pace is often geared to a collective group. And every so often you get a couple people in this flow state, but more likely what you get is you get a bunch of bored students, you get a bunch of anxious students. So I really started to reflect on what my role was as teacher. You know, how can I alleviate anxiety? How can I alleviate boredom? How can I get everyone into this flow state? And quite frankly, I think it's impossible in a collective group at a collective pace. So what I started to do is I started to think about what's the best way to proceed as a teacher. So what I believe is true is I believe that the farther we go, the harder the challenges get. Okay, so there's two quotes on the wall behind me. The secret to life is planting trees in whose shade you'll never sit. All right, so what does that mean? Well, I think every parent inherently knows what that means. That means prepare your child for the path. Don't prepare your path for the child. Life's going to get hard. And we need to make sure that when they leave us, they have all these skills to be what it is that they are supposed to be. I mean, that's true for a parent. So my thought is that what we need to do is we need to play the long game. We need to make sure that they have the skills to handle whatever life throws their way, okay? And it goes along with this quote, success is a journey, not a destination. That we shouldn't get wrapped up in these short-term wins and losses, but rather we should see success holistically and not just in these fractured, isolated silos which we tend to live our lives, whether it be a classroom or a season or whatever that is. So these two quotes really resonate with how I took upon my role as a teacher. Now, let's just talk about what I decided to do. So many of you that were in my class know that I did my grading on a three test assessment. And the reason I did it is because of this whole model. Okay, so what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to give one test, one moment in time, and prevent someone's skills from growing. Because if I limit your skills today, then potentially tomorrow your anxiety starts to build, right? So as a teacher playing the long game, why would I care if you took a test one time, two times, 473 times? All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grow your skills. So I want to make sure that when you face tomorrow's challenges, that you have these skills available to you. Okay, so many of you know this, and you know that on one particular day, I called that test one. And on test one, all you want to do is show me what it was you knew. And sometimes you knew this much, and sometimes you knew that much. And that was great. That was a first moment in time opportunity for you to develop your skills. But I wasn't satisfied with just one moment in time. I wanted you to retain your skills over the long term. So then I would offer you a second test. And then again, time elapsed. We did it as 1 week in time. And then you could show me your skills at the second opportunity. And then we'd wait even longer. We would wait 2 weeks. And then I would offer you a third test to show me what your skills had improved to. What level did your skills improve to? So this is something I believe in. It doesn't have to just be isolated to my class. It could be anything. It could be an athlete playing a season, an athlete playing a game. Is that we always have these moments in time, and we don't want to restrict ourselves to these what I call silos, or some people call buckets, where we restrict our thinking. Okay, so this is something I believed in. Now, the biggest, the hardest challenge for us teachers and us coaches is we live in a competitive world. And sometimes it's not enough just to think individually. It's not enough to just say, hey, I'm going to grow your skills, right? Like, to me as a teacher, that's, I think, what I'm asked to do. I'm asked to grow people's skills. As a baseball coach, I'm asked to grow people's skills. And I did a power law of freedom, and I said that one of the biggest risks to our thinking is when we think in a relative framework. And this relative framework, what it does is it compares one person to another person. So when I say life's competitive, but it's not a competition, this is something that speaks to that. So when I'm playing the long game, many times what I have to do is I have to remove myself from that competitive venue. I have to say, look, I know that two people are unique. And I know that they're in the same class, and I know that they're on the same field, and I know that life gets competitive, especially as the further on the line down you go, right? But if we're doing right as a teacher, if we're doing right as a coach, our primary goal should be to grow skills and make sure we pass on the love of what it is that we're the ambassador to, right? So as a coach, I'm an ambassador to baseball. As a math teacher, I'm an ambassador to math. I want to grow the love of math, just not rank my students in the math class. So one of the challenges to playing the long game is this idea of justice and fairness. It's well, how do we award, or how do we reward students that have more skills than others? Okay, and that of course happens. I mean, eventually employers want to know who's the best of you, so they can recruit you and they can employ you. But we have to be really careful with what our role is in this system. Okay, if I'm a 7th grade teacher, if I'm a 9th grade teacher, if I'm an 11th grade teacher, is my role to start ranking them and placing them into some sort of priority that early in the stage? Or is my role to play the long game and develop their skills? Because eventually life will judge them. Eventually life will say, you are better than you, and you deserve this, and you don't deserve that. But I believe as teachers, as educators, as influencers, first and foremost, what we have to do is we have to say, we need to develop your skills. Because if we develop your skills, so much, all we've got left are bored students. And into 2020, you can be unbored with your phone or anything you want to chase. But if we develop your skills, we can be unbored, or we could be hopefully in this flow state. But the more we develop your skills, the more we can rid ourselves of this anxiety. And I see anxious students. I see them in my classroom. I see them everywhere, that the skills don't match the challenges, and I'm afraid the skills don't match the challenges, because so many of us live in these silos or these buckets, and we pit one student against another student, and we say, no, you can't retest, or no, you can't continue to play because it's a competition and it wouldn't be fair to the other person. So I think we collectively need to really think about what it is we're doing. Are we developing skills, or are we playing a competition? And if we're playing a competition, I would argue that we need to allow students to quit, or that you don't play baseball, you don't play football, you don't play soccer, you don't enter in competitions without the choice of removing yourself from that competition. But what I'm seeing at the end of these challenges, I see students, very anxious students sometimes, showing up, and they don't have an out, that they're forced to take my class because they need the credit when they don't have the skills. And then I think the anxiety becomes self-evident. So the reason I wanted to do this video is I wanted to communicate to everyone really what I think the long game is. I think the long game is investing in someone's future by investing in their skills, by delaying this idea of competition and fairness, and giving people what we think they might deserve based upon some arbitrary moment in time. Because I say many times, if it's worth knowing Tuesday, it's worth knowing next week. So we need to really invest in developing skills. We need to invest in recognizing our role in the entire system, specifically as a teacher, as a coach. And I think in 2020, we need to do right by our students, because students are getting more choices. And if we don't develop their skills, they will live in an anxious state, and they will leave our presence. They will go to other schools that can embrace them and give them what it is they want. And many times this is hard. It's the hardest thing that I do as a teacher, is to know that you are wasting your time, right? You should be working, because life is in fact competitive, and you should be working, and you're not doing enough. You're choosing to be lazy with your time. So what we tend to do is we tend to punish laziness, and then in turn we prevent them from developing skills. Right? There's a quote: "When the student is ready, the teacher will appear." Well, I've embraced that, which means if you're lazy for 23 consecutive days, and the 24th day I'm ready for you. And I wish you showed up in my presence excited to learn, but I know that's not always the case. But if I don't give you my best effort on day 24, someone else might, and then I lose that opportunity to influence you. So life's competitive, but it's not a competition. Let's be really careful where we find ourselves and what role we play. And I think at the end of the day, as teachers, as educators, we really have to embrace this idea of developing skills and growing the love of what it is we teach, instead of pitting student against student or athlete against athlete early in the process. That comes down the road, and there is a time for that. I just don't think it's in a general high school curriculum. And with respect to athletes, I don't think it pops up until maybe 14 or 15U baseball. So let's play the long game, and let's start planting trees and not expect to benefit from the shade. All right, thanks.